Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for All Things DSO. It is wonderful to have my friend Brian Colao, the director of the Dykema DSO Industry Group, joining us again today. And Brian, you have been busy. I just watched you on another live webinar with ADSO like 2 hours ago.
Well, no, we did that, but I mean, I was like, didn't I tell you I wasn't coming back? I mean, the last two times, those questions you were asking me, I mean, it was like, well, we talking about all this crazy stuff. I thought I said I wasn't coming back, but Laura was like, no, you got to come sit here. And then now I see you're here. So I guess we're doing another one of these against my better judgment after all those tough questions you were asking me last time.
I feel like a lot of people like tiptoe around you, Brian. They kind of like toss you some softballs. And you and I are not like that. We're not like that when we're just like hanging out, having dinner. We're not like that, just hanging out with my coffee or and I think that's what people really enjoy is that they know that when we are chatting, we're going to go one level deeper. And I feel like this is unvarnished Brian Colao when you come
Well,
on.
I think they tricked me. Now I'm back here again. They were like, somebody else is coming up, and now it's Beth. So, I mean, they tricked me. I guess it would be rude to get up out of my seat. So, I guess we're here for another one of these.
Yeah, well, if you read your text messages from me, that would be like, hey, just want to confirm that this is what we're going to talk about today.
Didn't
Then
I
that's going to
block
be
you?
a
I thought I
shock.
blocked you, Beth. I thought I blocked you, but maybe not. I'll go back and look.
Well, while I have you, thanks so much for being gracious and
We're
joining
here.
and sitting down. Yes.
We're here.
So let's dive in. A couple of things that we want to talk about. First, what I'm just gonna say, like, what the hell is happening? I feel like Colorado, Vermont, California, there's just like a lot of talk right now about this heightened regulatory state and a lot of healthcare transaction, laws being passed. Take us through what has been changing in the past, 3 months since you and I have been speaking.
Nothing. I mean, the way you asked it, nothing. Are we in I mean, you think the way I'm not being silly. You said the last 3 months, nothing. But, have we been sort of since the new presidential administration, have we started, a heightened state of regulatory enforcement? Yeah, since, this president has decided that one of his flagship issues is healthcare fraud. And he doesn't want to see healthcare fraud, and he wants to incentivize the states to enforce their law by withholding federal funding if they don't do it. And on a federal level, he's empowered the Justice Department, the FBI, the OIG to go out and investigate these things. So we've been in a heightened state of enforcement since I would say middle of 25, because a new president took effect January, took a few months. But since about the middle of last year, about a year, we've been in a heightened state of enforcement. The last 3 months, there's been a couple press releases and things that have happened, but I don't know that anything dramatic has occurred. There's been a settlement, but I don't know if anything dramatic has occurred in the last 3 months other than we're in a heightened state of enforcement. And if you're operating a DSO, you've got to be mindful that this is not, I've been doing this about 31 years. There's been lenient states of enforcement and heightened states. And it seems like it's a constant, like, in 5 or 6 year cycles, it's a constant up and down. And we've entered a heightened state of enforcement. I'd say during the M&A boom from 2015 to 21, it was very lenient. There wasn't a lot of this going on. Now you've got a lot more of this stuff, going on. And the states are really mostly enforcing the laws that are on the books. There's not really been a super significant brand new law passed on corporate practice of dentistry or fee splitting or anything like that. They're just more aggressively interpreting and enforcing the rules that are already in.
So, Brian, if you can still hear me, because you froze for one quick second there, I was just wondering, is there a difference between what medical groups are facing in legislation and what dental groups are facing? And specifically, I'm thinking about where I misunderstood at one point that Vermont had put in some like waiting periods for like 90 days prior notice needing to be given before like transactions could be closed. And I think you corrected me about that when we were chatting about that last time.
Yeah, it is very different. Well, I mean, it depends what we're talking about, right? The regulations governing medical practices and medical service organizations, MSOs, often are very different than what governs DSOs. The two very often have nothing to do with each other. Sometimes people say, oh, I've come from medicine, it's the same. It's not. It's very, very different. They're very state specific. It depends what state you're in, depends what type of regulation you're talking about. And, there has been a movement lately, Beth, of, sort of anti-PE regulations that say if private equity is making an investment in, usually they'll define it as like a healthcare organization. And sometimes dentistry is excluded from that, but in some states, dentistry is included in that definition. And it's all sorts of things, notice requirements. In some extreme cases, you've got to obtain some approvals. California recently declined to pass what would have been the most aggressive piece of legislation that basically said the state attorney general would have to approve a transaction. And I thought that was just crazy. And I was pleased that, by the way, it passed their legislature, but the governor vetoed it. And because the governor vetoed it, it stopped it from passing. But, we're very close to having something very unfavorable in California. So there's a lot of these things, sort of that are pending, what I call anti-PE type things. But when you talk about just regular compliance, corporate practice of dentistry, fee splitting regulations, there hasn't been too many significant changes.
Now, you mentioned that the California settlement that happened. Can you just give us a quick broad overview for people that might not be aware of what that is and what it might mean for other people?
I mean, one of the largest DSOs in the country settled in California and agreed to some terms, about things that it was not allowed to do going forward. And the question that everybody's asking is, what does that mean for the rest of the industry? Meaning, I feel like, unfortunately, even though that settlement is not the law, it's not, it's just a settlement reached between a DSO and the state. I think the California Attorney General, unfortunately, is going to start treating it as if it's the law. And if it's investigating or negotiating with DSOs, it's going to demand that they agree or, give the concessions that were given in that settlement. And I'll tell everybody listening straight away, that is not the law. The DSOs I represent in California, we're not going to be doing those things. I mean, not that we're not, we may get into a back and forth, but, I don't believe that's the law, and I'm not going to just willingly agree to that because, somebody else settled on those terms. That settlement is personal to that organization. It shouldn't include, everybody else. But that's the question everybody's asking, is it going to make things tougher than it already is in California? And maybe not.
And was the settlement regarding advertising laws and how things were being presented? I forget the details of it.
Well, it basically covered the entire DSO structure. I mean, there was a complaint originally involving some things. I believe advertising was part of the original complaint that went to the attorney general. But when the time came for the settlement, there's probably 10 or 15 terms in there as to how that DSO is going to conduct business going forward in California. And it's changing. I mean, fundamentally, changing, the way that DSOs conducting business in California. And also, for other DSOs there, I think it would be for a number of organizations I'm aware of, it would be pretty inconvenient to have to change, to have to conform to that exact settlement. I mean, fortunately, that settlement is not the law. So it's not like the legislature passed the law and everybody's got to do it. That was just an individual settlement, but it could be quite difficult for some other organizations to conform their operation to the exact parameters of that settlement.
So, Brian, when people register for All Things DSO, there's a section where they can put in a viewer questions. We have a few viewer questions that have come in, and one is just about this.
They're not nice to me either. I don't know who you are, but the last series of questions, they've been asking me just ridiculously tough questions. Nobody wants to be nice to me. That's why, they had to trick me to get me on the show this time.
Brian, I happen to know the names of the folks. So if you would like to, put do not passes so that they can no longer come to your Dykema conference, which we're going to be talking to you about content in just a second. I'm usually I try to protect my sources.
I don't want to take extreme action, Beth, if I can help it, but they got to be nicer to me, everybody.
Well, this one's a nice one. Ready? I mean, yes, I just want to make sure that you're mentally prepared for this.
Wait, go ahead.
Okay. It says, what can DSOs do to stay in the government's good graces? And what are some of the best practices you're recommending that DSOs put into action? So I feel like this is a very fair question, Brian, and something that you can actually, help a lot of people know what they should be doing.
Even a blind squirrel gets an acorn, right? Like 1 out of 100, we get like a good. I agree, that is a good question, whoever asked it, but like 1 out of 100, they asked me like a good question, but it is a very good question, so I'm going to answer it. It's a great question. Um, the whole all of these complaints kind of come out of the way the DSO interacts with its practices. The DSO doesn't have a dental license, can't practice dentistry, can't interfere with clinical functions. As the law puts it, can't interfere with the independent professional judgment of the licensed dentist. And all of the complaints, usually almost all of them, come out of how the DSO interacts with the clinical side of the practice. And I would say the more the DSO meaningfully engages with the owner of the practice and involves them in certain decision making, it could be setting office hours, setting prices, which insurances you're going to take. It could be hiring dentists or clinical employees. If you have to, unfortunately, fire dentists or clinical employees, discipline them or manage them or supervise them for advertising and marketing, having approval of it. The more that the owner of the professional corporation, or what we say the PC owner, is involved in these decisions and approves of these decisions and signs off on them, the less problems you're going to have. The more times that the DSO just sort of undertakes all of these functions without any consultation or involvement with the owner of the PC, the chance of getting in trouble goes up significantly.
So I worked at one point for a DSO that had 173 locations, and it was all under one name, one doctor's name, who was the founding doctor. That's a lot of locations.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that today. Okay. That's in the beginning of DSOs, people set up organizations. They might have one owner, and that as long as that owner was licensed in these states, back in I'm saying starting in the 90s, early 2000s, you might have had an owner and he owned 100, or he or she 100, 125, 30, 40 offices. Today that's come under scrutiny. While it's technically permissible, like the law doesn't technically impose a limit, if there's ever an attorney general or a dental board or a regulator coming in and they ask you the question, let's say that you're the owner, Beth, and they're like, Beth, are you really telling me with a straight face you're supervising 140 offices? Well, how many of them have you visited? You'd have to visit one, two a week or something for a year. Like, how could that, if there's 52 weeks a year and there's 150 of them, you'd have to be visiting 3 a week to even be there one time. Like, how can you possibly tell us you've got any type of meaningful supervision over these offices, if you haven't been there? So, it's something that they're watching. In the early stages of DSOs, it would not be uncommon to have one owner own 100 and something offices. Today, while it's theoretically possible and not per se illegal, it just wouldn't be recommended. It just wouldn't be something I would recommend, because it would be hard to explain to somebody how you're meaningfully involved in the operation of these offices as one human being. There's just too many of them.
Now, I've heard you say recently as well that one of the reasons that we're in a heightened state of regulation right now is because we have some unhappy dentists that are out there. So they might be like raising a stink about different things. How do people protect themselves in that? And, for example, making sure that you're documenting everything that you have and what you're saying is going to be happening to that dentist and what's going to be happening at the end of their, agreement that they have signed with you.
Well, we're in a heightened state of regulatory enforcement for a bunch of like 3 or 4 reasons. I mean, one of them would be this presidential administration has made it a priority to go after healthcare fraud and pressure the states to enforce their laws. So that would be number one. Number two would be, as you pointed out, there's a lot of unhappy dentists. So when you have unhappy, and why are they unhappy? Again, we've covered this over and over again on this show. The recapitalization events haven't happened, because the market conditions are just very tough with the elevated interest rates and everything else going on. But a lot of dentists are just generally unhappy. They thought they would have had the recapitalization event and they don't. So now, they're looking for every little tiny thing, things that if we had the recap in 3 or 4 years, even if it bothered them, they would have been like, that annoys me, but I'm getting my money, next year. I don't care. Now that there's really, for a lot of organizations, not a clear date in sight when the recapitalization event is going to happen, the dentists are digging in. If there's things going on they don't like, they're making complaints, and they're making lots of complaints. So that's sort of the second reason. The third reason is, during the big market boom of 2021, a lot of things were done really, really quickly. And there were some folks, quite frankly, we've been through this too, in the DSO industry, that maybe didn't get best advice, or they weren't experienced in dental. They didn't have any track record in dental, and they didn't fundamentally understand the business of dentistry. So they made some footfalls and missteps on the way they set stuff up. So the combination of all three of those factors have led to a heightened regulatory climate, or regulatory enforcement climate right now. I think that's why this is going on.
So addressing one of those points, then, like, if you don't know if you're out of compliance or not, because maybe you did sign something back in 2019, 2020, 2021, beginning of 2022, like, you really need to be making sure then that you are working with a legal firm in order to just go through all the documentation and make sure that you have everything sewn up. Because
it really, in this climate more than ever, it's recommended. I don't ever like to make this like infomercials or shameless. Right, and this is what I've always said. You don't ever gotta hire me or my team, but you better get somebody that understands dental. It would not be acceptable to be like a DSO and say, yeah, we don't have any lawyer looking at this. We're just figuring it out ourselves, or the lawyer we use doesn't have experience in dental, and they might be a good regular business lawyer, but they don't understand DSOs, and we're just plugging through this whole thing. No, that would not be good. If I asked you a question, do you have a plan of compliance? And you're like, what's that? Yeah, this would be a time to, and it's true. Sometimes I talk to people, they set up these organizations really quick in 2021, 22, they didn't have time for this, or their founder grew it so quick, they didn't have time for this. I don't judge. I understand. But if I ask that imaginary question to you, what does your plan of, compliance look like? And your secret answer, you don't have to say anything. Like, oh, what's that? Well, yeah, this will be the time to call somebody and we'll tell you what's that. And we can very quickly walk through, where you stand now, and, improvements that, potentially could be made to get you in good graces if you're ever audited or there's ever a problem. And there's lots and lots of organizations, I know for a fact, that haven't done that in a long, long time. And this heightened state of regulatory enforcement, this climate right now, this would be a great time to kind of look at that.
Well, one of the other things that they should probably be taking a look at is succession agreements, and making sure that they are strengthened and that they can be defended. So do you have any advice for folks that may not have looked at the succession agreements lately, and kind of what have you seen over the course of the past year that would be advice that you give?
Yeah, they come in different varieties. The older forms are restricted stock, transfer option agreements or transfer agreements. Others are called business continuity agreements. Some are called succession agreements. Our form is a succession agreement. They've come under attack by some of the regulators recently in California and some other states. And, there's a lot of nuances to putting that agreement together. It depends on the organization. It depends on the state or states that you're in. And, it depends on a lot of individual situations, and something that works in one state might not work in another state. Something that works for a particular organization might not work for another organization. And it's not the sort of thing that you want to just grab some law firm's form off the shelf, sign it, and think you're covered. You really don't want to do that. You really want to get somebody that knows what they're doing to review those, because they've been under attack lately by regulators. And, if you don't have a regulatory compliant succession agreement, your organization is going to be vulnerable to attacks by regulators. And, if something happens to some of your owners, you're not going to be able to continue on the organization the way you ordinarily would if you don't have one of those agreements in place that's compliant.
Now, where do we stand currently with non-competes? Are there some states that you can have non-competes for your clinicians, some that you can't? Like, where are we in the country with that right now?
Well, it's state specific. The FTC tried to ban them, but that was under the other administration, and that didn't pass. So there's no federal, policy about it. A lot of states have cracked down recently and either really restricted the ability to have these agreements or made them much harder to enforce, or some have eliminated them. It largely depends where you are. It also depends what you're doing, Beth. If you're a regular associate dentist just working there, it's becoming very, very difficult to enforce those in a lot of places. But if it's the sale of a business, meaning I gave you millions of dollars for your business, they're enforceable everywhere. Even in California, people say, oh, they don't got them in California. Well, not for ordinary employees, but for the sale of a business. If I paid you hypothetically $10 million for your business, I absolutely could enforce that non-compete in California, because that's a non-compete for a sale of a business. Because even places like California say that would be so unfair if you gave that person $10 million and then the next day they ran across the street and stole all the patients or stole all the customers. So it depends what you're doing. If you're selling a business, you're still in really good shape. If you're just employing a regular employee or associate, it can be very difficult, and it depends on what state you're in.
So, Brian, we had a question that came in on one of the registration forms for this. That says, what strategies do you have for positioning DSOs for interoperability in accordance with the 21st Century Cures Act? And I'm not really, I should be more familiar, but I'm not that familiar with the 21st Century Cures Act.
Yeah, I've heard some grumblings about that. I have not made myself an expert on that. I'm going to now, after this, I'm going to take a little more look at that. But that's not a hot button issue right now that's facing the industry. But it's a good question, and one that, based on this, I'll take a look at for future. But it's not one I've had to really, really jump in the middle of too much right now.
Well, maybe if you grace me with your presence again when we do this for the next quarterly.
Yeah, when I come back, they had to trick me this time. If I ever come back here, I'll look at that issue.
Well, speaking of a hot button topic, I know that you love talking about interest rates with me. It's like one of your favorite things to do.
They might go up again. We're moving backwards, and I'm just depressed by the whole thing.
Right? I know. I almost texted you when
we've been talking for 2 years about, they got to go down, and they have gone down like a bit, at the end of 24, and in 25 they kind of went down, but now they're talking about maybe because it looks like, I'm frightened, and every time I say I think something else happens, but it looks like there might be a peace accord with the whole Iran thing going on right now.
It's a good thing this is live, because I feel like that changes on a minute.
It does, it does. So what I'm thinking, which could be like obsolete by tomorrow, is they were saying they were going to raise the interest rates because mainly fuel costs have just skyrocketed as a result of the Strait of Hormuz being closed and all that stuff. So fuel prices are going up, and they said that's the biggest driver. Like, milk and eggs isn't really the issue. The issue is fuel prices, and because of that, inflation is continuing to go up, and they may have to raise the interest rates. My hypothesis that could be obsolete by tomorrow is if we do really have peace and we've reached some type of peace deal here, and they open up that strait and the oil prices go down, then maybe the inflationary conditions will go down, and then they don't have to raise the interest rates. They can look at lowering them again. But the new Fed chairman's been in there since about May 22nd, and we've not had, we're about a month in, about June 22nd, 23rd here, and we've not had, anybody they're talking about raising them. They're not talking about lowering them.
That's why I was going to text you, because I knew you had strong feelings about that whole situation.
I just don't know. There's too much uncertainty. I wish I had like a strong, this is what you do. It's unfortunately, as long as these challenging conditions persist, it's not going to be the right environment to lower the interest rates. And if it's not the right environment to lower the interest rates, then it's not going to create favorable M&A conditions. And remember, lowering it one time ain't going to solve the problem. We're going to need 3 or 4 of these things together, and we haven't even had one, and the year's almost half, over. So even if we get one in a month or two, it's going to take 6, 7 months to get enough to improve it. So that's why it's just a little dejecting. A lot of great things going on in the dental industry. I love it. I'm not at all concerned about the dental industry as a whole. successful, but on this whole business of interest rates going down, it's becoming a little dejecting.
Well, so I'm going to be flying into Denver 3 weeks from today for your conference, the Dykema DSO Industry Conference, and I'm so excited. What are some of the hot button topics that we're going to be seeing on the stage there?
We've got some pretty cool things. We've got some panels called Journey Through DSO History. It's the premiere of a film that I commissioned from the beginning of the Second Dynasty of Egypt, when the first dentist walked the earth, through 2026 Dykema Conference. It's a movie, the world premiere of Journey Through DSO History. Will kick off.
Do you play all the roles in it? Are you like caveman?
No, there's no live actors, but it's a rock and roll documentary. Okay. And I think it's really, really fun. Yeah, there's no actors. It's not like a movie of like they film me running around saying stuff. No, it's nothing like that. I'm not even in it from that standpoint. It's a documentary from beginning to end. Then we've got a couple segments called Turning Points in DSO History. We have a segment called Lessons Through DSO History. And we're going to look back over the last 30 years and see the lessons that we could learn. I'm really excited. A lot of folks in our industry are young, Beth, like you. They haven't been in the industry 30 years, and they don't know all the tough lessons we had to learn in like 1996 and 1997 and stuff like that. So I'm excited to kind of bring that. Steve Bilt is going to lead sort of that segment. And I think, just based on the notes and things he's told me and some stuff, I think it's going to be a great segment. Dr. Rick Workman will be there helping him out on that segment. Plus some analysts that have studied, the dental industry and the DSO segment. So I'm really excited, about that. Another panel we have is on going public. Everybody wants to talk about it. We've got one of our dental titans, Pat Haynes, is going to be on stage from Thurston Group, and he's going to talk about, what it might mean for some of these organizations to go public or not, and give kind of his thoughts. That's really getting a lot of traction. Another one I'm excited about is Larry Benz, the CEO of Dental Care Alliance, has a segment called, what I learned in my first year as CEO. I think that's incredible. I mean, I can't wait. I mean, I've heard Larry speak now a couple times, and I've loved hearing him speak. And I think, literally can't wait for, his insight on this. I'm sure people have seen the announcements. We've got Nick Saban, Hall of Fame winning is coming incredible. We've got Rick Pitino, basketball coach, going to be there. Of course, the woman in DSO panel is going to be really, really great. I mean, I think we've got Deanne McClain from Heartland's going to be there. Bob Fontana is going to be on that. Pat Bauer is going to be on that. I'm really excited about the woman in DSO panel. I mean, that's going to be a very, powerful segment also that we're putting on. And then we've got, some of those 15-minute segments that we've talked about in the past on, how you get the most clinical performance out of your, dentist is going to be one. How you maximize the performance of teams is another one we're putting together. So I love those, 15-minute segments as well. So, yeah, I mean, we've got a really good, really solid program planned. We've got an international panel, of course, buy side, sell side as well. I mean, just some really good content.
The Thurston Group, they're the ones that just were involved with SGA, right? So it's SGA, D4C, and a third group that I'm going blank on the name right now, correct? Where they had
not D4C, but yes, they have. It's SGA Gen 4.
Gen 4, thank you.
I think they've got 3 or 4 platforms, and they've been Thurston one of the most prolific investors in the DSO space, and we've had a great relationship with Pat Haynes, their chairman, and Dan Davis, their managing director, and a lot of folks, and we've worked with them on a lot of things. I mean, they did U.S. oral surgery, they did U.S. endo. Also, they sold those platforms, but they started Smile.
I didn't realize that.
For that, yeah. I mean, they've been very, very active in the space, and we've had a very long relationship with them. And it'll be great to have Pat on stage to talk about the next evolution, this potential going public thing. No one, to my knowledge, has really just focused solely on that on a 30-minute segment. And Pat's been in the industry for 60-something years in the investment industry, so we can't wait to hear his insights.
I go to a lot of shows, and actually, I don't think I've seen Pat Thune on stage.
He was a dental titan. He's won
Yeah.
dental titan award at our event. Beth, shame on you. You only come every other year now, like, or something. Like, we gave you a hard time. You miss a few is what you did, if I remember correctly.
Oh my God, the one year I missed because it was my mother's birthday, and you will not let me
you
forget
could bring
it.
her. We would have a party for her. We'd get her a cake or something. But I digress on that. But we've had Pat on the big. My point is, you might have been one of the years you couldn't come, but we had Pat on the big stage. He won the Dental Titan Award a few years ago. He's also been on PE panels, so he has appeared, but he doesn't appear often. You're absolutely right. If you go to typical DSO conferences, you will not see, Pat Haynes. He does this really as a favor to us, and we're honored to have him. And he has so much knowledge. So it's a real treat having Pat, on our stage. And I'm looking forward to that segment, because a lot of people, you've asked me on this show, so have others, about, are these things going public? What's going to happen? And he's going to hit that issue. He's going to hit that issue head on.
Well, we only have a minute left. One of the other reasons why people love to come to Dykema is because there's a lot of fun things to do and a lot of opportunities for networking and, meeting people. Tell us a little bit about that this year.
Well, I just looked at the layout for our club. Well, they're calling that Club Fuego, from 11 p.m. till 2 a.m. I hope we'll see you there, Beth. You can't go, some people say
I go to bed earlier than that.
Are you coming or are you going to bed?
I'm going to go to your first set, where you have, we have the live band outside on the lawn. Like, I can do that. But I mean, like, I don't know, 10:30 is like 12:30 Eastern time. I'm like cooked at that point.
Well, Beth, this starts at 11 Mountain, which is about 1 a.m. your time. And I'm sorry to say this to you, but I think you should go. And the reason you should go is I got pyrotechnics. I got LED screens. This is going to be like a Las Vegas, club. I mean, it's not like, we just took a ballroom at the Gaylord and we're pretending it's a club and we got a little DJ. No, I got an elevated platform. I got pyrotechnics. I got LED screens. I've got lasers shooting in the back. I've got all kinds of, electronic dance floor stuff going on, that this is going to be, probably not as good as Vegas, because they spend tens of millions of dollars on their stuff. But this is going to be the closest thing you can do to emulate, one of those crazy Vegas clubs. So that's going to be fun. That's from 11 till 2 a.m. If you're Eastern, Beth, then I'm sorry. That might be one.
Who's your DJ? Do you have Lane back again?
Lane's coming back. He's going to DJ, because Lane did this thing. If I remember last year, it was same thing, 11 to 2. And then I got a report the next day from the Gaylord. I mean, it was like double secret probation. I don't know what they could do. They were like, well, Mr. Colao, we had to remove people at 5 a.m. from the club. They refused to leave. And it was like, I don't know what to tell you guys. I got to get on stage. But, I actually got a formal complaint that it was supposed to end at 2. And the Gaylord had to cut the power to the conference room or something and shut it all off to get people out there at 5 a.m. And I talked to Lane about this recently, and he said, look, it ends when it ends. We're going to have fun, and when it ends, it ends. The people tell me, I don't tell them when it ends. So I think Lane's ready to have fun again. So, I don't know if we're going to have a problem with the Gaylord again, but we're doing that. Now,
at some point, the Gaylord's going to stop letting you come back between the
5-year contract. They don't seem like that's the way it is. They like it's like the certain people's security in that moment are like, this is unacceptable. It's 5 a.m. You got to leave. But then when the time comes for a new contract, boy, the sales staff is like, oh no, we want to get you for another 5 years or something. So there's a disconnect between security at Club Fuego and the actual sales staff at Marriott that, signs me up. But we're signed for 5 more years there.
Oh, that's great.
For the earlier thing that you're going to, definitely go to. Well, I hope you'll come to the later one. But for the earlier one, look, we're going to have the Spasmatics again. That's going to be incredible. We got the drone show going on. We got a wonderful dinner under the stars. So I think, everybody will go to that. I don't know if some people are going to go to bed, but everybody's going to go to that thing. Yeah. And that thing's really, really, fun that we're going to put that on Wednesday night. We've got an incredible, dinner under the stars. We're saving the drone show for Thursday, but still there's going to be some music and, dinner under the stars, and everybody can network and catch up. And, Denver's one of those beautiful places in the summer when the sun goes down. It's like 60s and 70s. It's not like where I am in Dallas, 102 degrees today. They got World Cup. Those guys are like suffocating and dying and sweating. We don't got that in Denver. It's beautiful weather there. So, the dinners under the stars are really, really great. And we're really excited, for all of that stuff. And I just think it's going to be a great event. We're looking at, right where we were last year. This is a tough year, for conferences. There's been a lot of budget cuts, a lot of challenging things, but we're going to have, without question, the largest DSO event this year. We may not, Beth, break our all-time attendance record. We'll try to do that in 27, but we're going to have almost as many people as last year, and it'll be the largest event in the DSO industry in the world.
That's fantastic. And I know that you also are going to have pre-sessions again on Wednesday.
Yes, no, the workshops are incredible on Wednesday. I mean, we've just got some incredible stuff that's being planned on technology, on how to grow your EBITDA, on artificial intelligence. I mean, you don't want to miss, these workshops. I mean, to me, Beth, I didn't ask you when you're arriving, but a lot of people are coming Monday. This thing used to start Wednesday. I got like probably 700-800 people coming on Monday because there are going to be some pre-events on Tuesday. Certainly, there's going to be a number of happy hours Tuesday night. Wednesday, all day is workshops, and it kicks off with a woman in DSO, then the opening reception, then the dinner under the stars and things like that. And then, of course, all the craziness of Thursday. A lot of pyrotechnics going off Thursday and lasers. Don't want to miss that. And then Friday, with Nick Saban. So it's become almost like a whole week for everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, our entire crew from Planet DDS is flying in, I think on Monday. I'm coming in Tuesday with our videographer, Ben. And I think our first event with you is Tuesday afternoon from 4 until 6 p.m., where we're doing a cocktail reception with Aqualine.
That's going to be fun, but we're doing one of these. Aren't we filming one of these at Dykema?
We are, yes. It will be airing on Wednesday morning, just with all of the latest information and what people need to know to make the most out of their conference experience. It will be a lot of fun.
I think we'll do that. We'll have all all the final facts will be in by then. And I think maybe if people have time, they can tune in Wednesday and we'll kind of tell them some thoughts on how to maximize their networking and maximize the value of the event. I'm actually looking forward to doing that one.
Well, I can't wait to see you in Denver in just a few weeks. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you coming back on despite the grief that we give you, and can't wait to have another conversation with you.
All right, Beth, it's terrific. Thanks so much for having me again.
Bye-bye.